The demolition crew arrives at dawn, sledgehammers gleaming in the morning light. But when they swing open the shed door, they freeze, complete with a kitchen, bedroom, and a woman holding a legal document that changes everything. What started as a neighbor's petty complaint is about to become the property battle of the century, bright yellow and unforgiving against the weathered wood of Sarah Chun's mailbox. Her hands trembled as she read the words that would change everything. Zoning violation, structured demolition, required 30 days. Compliance. Sarah's coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering against the porch steps of the small house she'd inherited from her grandmother. The irony wasn't lost on her. The house that had sheltered 3 generations of her family was now too small to shelter her dreams, but the modest shed in the backyard had become her sanctuary. "No, no, no," she whispered, scanning the document, again citing unpermitted structures and neighborhood aesthetic violations. 23 years she'd lived next door to the Blackwoods. Her grandfather had built in 1987, sat peacefully in the far corner of her property, surrounded by the oak trees that had grown up around it like protective sentinels. To most people, it looked like any other backyard storage building. Millbrook County Planning and Zoning. "This is Janet. Let me pull up your file." The sound of keyboard clicking filled the silence. "Yes, here it is. Complaint filed by Richard Blackwood regarding an unpermitted structure exceeding residential zoning allowances. The structure measures 192 square feet and lacks proper building permits, but it's been there for over 30 years. My grandfather built it." "Ma'am, regardless of when it was built, if it doesn't have permits and exceeds the 120 square foot limit for accessory structures, it's a violation. You have 30 days to remove it or face daily fines of $500. Sarah's knees buckled. $500 a day would bankrupt her within a week. Her teacher's salary barely covered the property taxes on the house her grandmother had left her. Taxes that had tripled in the 5 years since the tech company had moved to town and gentrification had swept through their once quiet neighborhood. "There has to be another option," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You could apply for a variance, but that's a 6-month process with no guarantee of approval. The demolition deadline remains firm." The line went dead. Sarah stared. At the phone, then at the shed that had become her lifeline. Inside its walls, she'd built something extraordinary, something that might just save her. The knock came at 3:47 p.m., sharp and authoritative. Sarah opened the door to find Richard Blackwood standing on her porch, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the October wind. Behind him stood a woman in a crisp business suit, holding a tablet and wearing the predatory smile of someone who made their living from other people's misfortune. "Hope you received the notice. I wanted to discuss your options." "My options?" Sarah's voice cracked. Now, let's not be dramatic. I'm here to help. This is Miranda Cross from Cross Development. She has an offer that might interest you." Miranda stepped forward, her heels clicking against the porch boards. "Ms. Chen, I understand you're facing some difficulties with your property. I'm prepared to make you a very generous offer well above market value for your house and land. You could relocate somewhere more suitable for your ... circumstances. More suitable for my circumstances." Sarah's anger flared. "The beginning, I'm sure there are other code issues that could arise." Sarah looked between Richard and Miranda, the pieces clicking. "Into place, you orchestrated this. The complaint, the timing, this was all planned." Richard's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. "Your little house and that eyesore of a shed are dragging down everyone's property values." Sarah laughed bitterly. "You mean you're good? How much is Cross Development paying you to push out the longtime residents?" Miranda's smile widened. "That will proceed regardless of your decision here. And if I refuse, then you'll face the daily fines, the legal battles, the stress of fighting a system that's much larger than you are. Eventually, you'll lose the house anyway, but with far less compensation." Sarah felt the walls closing in. The shed violation was just the opening move in a larger game, one designed to force her out of the neighborhood. But Richard and Miranda had made one crucial miscalculation. They assumed she would roll over and surrender. "I need time to think," Sarah said finally. "Of course, but don't think too long. The demolition deadline is firm, and my offer won't remain open indefinitely." Miranda handed her a business card. Call me when you're ready to be reasonable." As they walked away, Sarah heard Richard's voice drift back. The shed needs to come. Down one way or another. Make sure she understands that. That evening, Sarah sat in her kitchen, staring at the violation notice spread across her grandmother's old oak table. The house felt smaller somehow, as if the walls were already closing in. Outside, the shed stood silhouetted against the darkening sky, its windows glowing with the warm light from within. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister Amy in Portland heard about the shed. "Fresh start might be good for you." Sarah deleted the message without responding. Everyone assumed she should just give up, just walk away. But they didn't understand what the shed meant to her, what it had become over the past 2 years. She walked across the backyard. The shed's door was painted deep blue, the color of her grandmother's favorite dress. Sarah had repainted it herself last spring. What had once been a cluttered storage space was now a perfectly appointed tiny home. The far wall held a compact kitchen mini-fridge, 2-burner stove, farmhouse sink beneath a window that looked out onto the oak trees, a Murphy bed folded down from the opposite wall, revealing built-in storage underneath. The center of the space held a small dining table that doubled as a desk, 2 chairs, and a reading nook with cushions covered in her grandmother's hand-sewn quilts. Every inch had been planned, every detail carefully considered. Sarah had spent months researching tiny home designs, watching YouTube videos, learning carpentry and plumbing and electrical work. Purpose. The shed wasn't just a building, it was her escape plan. With the rising property taxes threatening to force her from her family home, she'd been preparing to rent out the main house while living in the tiny home, where she'd grown up, where she taught at the elementary school, where her roots ran deep. But now Richard Blackwood, him won. But she'd fight smart, not just hard. 3 hours later, she found what she'd been looking for, a loophole in the county's zoning ordinance that might just save her Shadon her future. The next morning, the only law firm in Millbrook County that specialized in zoning disputes, the receptionist, a woman with kind eyes and graying hair, looked up from her computer. "Can I help you? Mr. Henderson is with a client, but let me see if Associate Martinez is available. She handles most of our zoning cases." A sharp-eyed woman in her 30s, who listened intently as Sarah explained her situation. "So, you want to fight the violation," Alina said when Sarah finished. "That's going to be expensive, and honestly, your chances aren't great. The county has broad authority when it comes to unpermitted structures. But what if it's not just a shed anymore?" Alina raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Sarah pulled out her phone. Sarah woke to the acrid smell of smoke and the sound of crackling flames. Through her window, she could see orange light dancing across the oak trees. Her heart stopped. The main house was on fire. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911 while throwing on clothes, her hands shaking as she struggled with the buttons. Outside, she could hear the roar of flames and the sound of windows exploding from the heat. 911. "What's your emergency?" "My house is on fire, 1247 Maple Street. Please hurry." Sarah burst from the shed and ran toward the main house, but the heat drove her back. The entire front porch was engulfed, flames licking at the windows of her grandmother's bedroom. 40 years of memories for generations of history. Disappearing into the night, fire trucks arrived within minutes, their sirens wailing through the quiet neighborhood. Sarah watched from her backyard as firefighters battled the blaze. There, hoses cutting through the smoke and flames. Neighbors gathered on the street, some in bathrobes, others fully dressed as if they'd been awake. Richard Blackwood stood on his front porch, his face illuminated by the fire's glow. He wasn't wearing pajamas, he was fully dressed, and Sarah could swear she saw something that looked like satisfaction in his expression. "Ma'am, are you the homeowner?" A firefighter approached, his face streaked with soot. "Yes, I'm Sarah Chen. Is anyone hurt?" "No injuries reported. The house was unoccupied." "Yes, I live in the shed, safely away from the flames. I rent out the main house, but the tenant moved out last week." The firefighter nodded, making notes. "We'll have the fire marshal investigate the cause. You'll need to find somewhere else to stay tonight." Sarah looked at the shed, then at the smoldering remains of her family home. "I can stay in the shed. It's not damaged." "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we can't allow that. The property is part of an active fire scene. You'll need to find alternative accommodations." As if summoned by the word accommodations, Miranda Cross appeared at Sarah's side. The developer looked perfectly put together, despite the early hour, her hair styled and her makeup flawless. "Sarah, I'm so sorry about your house. What a terrible tragedy." Miranda's voice dripped with false sympathy. "I've taken the liberty of booking you a room at the Millbrook Inn. Company expense, of course. That's very kind, but I don't need, I insist. And perhaps tomorrow, when you've had time to process this tragedy, we can revisit my offer. The insurance settlement, plus my purchase price, would give you a fresh start somewhere new." Sarah stared at Miranda, pieces clicking into place. "You were expecting this, weren't you? I'm not sure what you mean. You're dressed like you're going to a business meeting. It's 3 in the morning, and you look like you just stepped out of a salon. How did you even know about the fire?" Miranda's smile faltered for just a moment. "I have a police scanner. I monitor emergency calls for potential development opportunities. It's standard practice in my business. Your business of profiting from other people's tragedies. My business of helping people move forward after setbacks. Sarah, you're in. Shock. Let me help you." Sarah looked back at the house, at the firefighters still spraying water on the smoldering ruins. The place where she'd taken her first steps, where she'd done homework at her grandmother's kitchen table, where she'd planned her future, all of it was gone. But something inside her hardened. The fire was too convenient, too perfectly timed. And Miranda Cross was too prepared, too eager to swoop in with solutions. "I'll find my own accommodation," Sarah said, "and I'll be staying in town." By dawn, the fire was out. But Sarah's life had changed forever. The main house was a total loss. The roof had collapsed, the windows were blown out, and everything inside was either burned or destroyed by smoke and water damage. Only the shed remained untouched, sitting in the backyard like a small miracle. Sarah stood in Mrs. Patterson's kitchen, wrapped in a borrowed robe and drinking coffee that tasted like ash. The elderly woman had insisted she stay the night, despite Sarah's protests. "I've called my insurance company," Sarah said, staring at the phone Alina Martinez had given her. "They're sending an adjuster tomorrow." "What did the fire marshal say?" "About the cause, they're still investigating." But Sarah hesitated. "Mrs. Patterson, did you see anyone around my house last night?" Before the fire, the older woman's eyes sharpened. "What kind of someone?" "I don't know. I just have this feeling that the fire wasn't accidental." Mrs. Patterson set down her coffee cup. "Sarah, there's something you need to know. I wasn't going to say anything, but after what happened, what I've been watching Richard Blackwood's house, call it old lady nosiness, but something's been bothering me about his behavior lately. Last night, around midnight, I saw him leave his house. He was carrying something looked like a gas can." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Are you sure?" "I'm 87 years old, honey, but my eyes still work fine. He was gone for about an hour, then came back. 20 minutes later, your house was on fire. We need to tell the police." "With what proof?" "An old woman's word against a man who's lived here for 40 years. They'll say I'm confused, that I imagined it." Mrs. Patterson reached across the table and gripped Sarah's hand. "But I know what I saw." Sarah's phone rang. Alina Martinez's name appeared on the screen. "Sarah, I just heard about the fire. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, but the house is gone." "Alina, I think someone set the fire deliberately." "What makes you say that?" Sarah explained about Miranda Cross's convenient appearance, Richard Blackwood's suspicious behavior, and the threatening text she'd received the night before. "This is serious," Alina said. "If someone committed arson to force you off your property, it's a federal crime, but we need proof." "What kind of proof?" "Security cameras, witnesses, physical evidence. The fire marshal's investigation might reveal accelerants or other signs of arson. In the meantime, I'm filing an emergency injunction to prevent cross-development from making any moves on your property." After Alina hung up, Sarah sat in Mrs. Patterson's kitchen, trying to process what had happened. 24 hours ago, she'd been fighting to save her shed. Now she was potentially the victim of arson, and the main house her grandmother's house. Her family's legacy was gone. But something else was bothering her. Something Miranda Cross had said. "Mrs. Patterson, can I use your computer?" An hour later, Sarah had found what she was looking for. Cross Development wasn't just a local company, it was a subsidiary of Meridian Holdings, a massive development corporation based in Atlanta. and Meridian Holdings had been quietly buying up properties throughout Millbrook County for the past 3 years. But the really interesting discovery was in the county planning records. 3 months ago, Meridian Holdings had submitted preliminary plans for a massive mixed-use development called Millbrook Commons. The proposed site included a 12-block area of the historic district including Sarah's Street. The plans showed luxury condos, upscale retail, and a boutique hotel. The projected value was $200 million, and every single property in the development zone would need to be acquired for the project to move forward. Sarah printed out the documents and called Alina. "I found something. Cross development isn't just trying to buy my property there, trying to buy the entire neighborhood. This is about a huge development project." "How huge?" $200 million. They need to acquire every property in a 12-block area. My house, my shadits, right in the middle of the proposed development. Alina was quiet for a moment. That explains the pressure tactics. If they can't acquire all the properties, the entire project falls apart. You're not just fighting for your shed, Sarah. You're fighting against a massive development that would destroy the entire historic district. But they can't just force people to sell, can they? Not directly, but they can make life very difficult. For holdouts, code violations, tax reassessments, mysterious fires, Elena's voice trailed off. "Sarah, I think you need to consider that you might be in real danger." "What do you mean?" "I mean that $200 million is a lot of money. People have been killed for far less." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "You think they'd actually hurt me? I think you need to be very careful. And I think we need to expose this conspiracy before they make another move." That afternoon, Sarah met with Fire Marshal Jake Morrison at the ruins of her house. Morrison was a weathered man in his 50s with the deliberate manner of someone who'd seen too much destruction. "I've completed my preliminary investigation," he said, leading Sarah through the charred remains of her front porch. "The fire started here, near the electrical panel. But there are some anomalies." "What kind of anomalies?" "Burn patterns that don't match an electrical fire. Accelerant residue on the porch boards," and this he held up a melted plastic container. "Gas can. Found it in the bushes about 50 feet from the house." Sarah's heart raced. So it was arson. "I'm ruling it suspicious pending further investigation. But between you and me, this fire was set deliberately. Someone doused your porch with gasoline and lit it up. Can you prove who did it?" Morrison's expression hardened. "That's where things get complicated. I've been the fire marshal in this county for 20 years. I know how these things work. Whoever did this, they have connections. They have influence, and they're going to make it very difficult to build a case." "What do you mean?" The call came at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday, exactly 3 weeks after Sarah's live stream had brought down cross development. She'd been expecting it, dreading it, but hoping it would never come. "Ms. Chen, this is Principal Williams from Millbrook Elementary. I need you to come in this morning. We need to discuss your employment status." Sarah's blood ran cold. "My employment status? There have been some concerns raised about your recent activities. The school board feels we need to address them immediately." Even after Alina had gotten an injunction to stop the tree cutting, half of them had already been destroyed. The view from her tiny home now included a wasteland of splintered wood and churned earth. "What kind of concerns?" "It would be better to discuss this in person. Can you be here by 8? The line went dead. Sarah sat on her Murphy bed, still wearing the pajamas she'd thrown on to confront the tree-cutting crew. 23 years she'd been a teacher. 23 years of lesson plans and parent conferences and staying late to help struggling students. And now they were going to fire her for refusing to let developers destroy her home. Alina Martinez, "Sarah, I just got a call from a contact at the school board. They're planning to terminate you this morning." "On what grounds?" "Public disruption, bringing negative attention to the school district, conduct unbecoming of an educator." "It's all fabricated, but they have enough board votes to make it stick." Sarah closed her eyes. She'd known this was coming. Taking on cross-development hadn't just made her a local hero, had made her a target for every powerful interest that profited from the status quo. And now they were coming for her livelihood. What are my options? Fight it. File a wrongful termination suit, claim retaliation for or I could just let them fire me and try to find another job. In a county where everyone knows you as the woman who brought down a development company, "Sarah, they're not just firing you, they're blacklisting you." Sarah understood. The message was clear. This is what happens to people who fight back. This is what happens when you refuse to know your place. But Sarah Chen had learned something over the past few weeks. She'd learned that sometimes the most important battles are the ones you're not supposed to win. "Alina, I need you to do something for me." "What?" "I need you to call every reporter who covered my story. Tell them that Millbrook County is firing a teacher for defending her constitutional rights. Tell them that the same corruption that tried to destroy my home is now trying to destroy my career." "Sarah, are you sure?" "Once you escalate this, there's no going back. You'll be in the spotlight forever." Sarah looked around her tiny home at the kitchen, where she made breakfast every morning, at the reading nook where she graded papers, at the window that now looked out on destruction instead of beauty. They'd already taken so much from her. They weren't going to take her voice, I'm sure. Millbrook Elementary School looked exactly as it had when Sarah first started teaching there 23 years ago. The same brick facade, the same cheerful bulletin boards, the same smell of floor wax and hope that had greeted her every morning of her career. But everything felt different now. The secretary who'd always smiled at her avoided eye contact. Teachers she'd worked with for decades suddenly found excuses to duck into their classrooms when they saw her coming. Sarah walked into Principal Williams's office to find 4 people waiting for her: Williams' Superintendent Mason, school board chair, Patricia Hendricks, and a man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as the district's attorney. "Sarah, please sit down," Principal Williams said, his voice carefully neutral. "I want you to know that this is one of the most difficult conversations I've ever had to have." "Then don't have it," Sarah said. "I've been an exemplary teacher. For 23 years, I've never had a negative evaluation. My students consistently score above district averages. Parents request me specifically for their children." "This isn't about your teaching ability," Superintendent Mason said. "This is about your recent behavior and its impact on the school district." "My recent behavior? You mean exercising my constitutional rights?" The attorney leaned forward. "Ms. Chen, your actions over the past month have created significant controversy and negative publicity for the district. The school board has received dozens of complaints from parents and community members." "What kind of complaints?" "Concerns about your judgment, questions about whether someone who engages in such public confrontations should be entrusted with children, worries about the district's reputation." "You're firing me because I wouldn't let developers burn down my house and steal my property." "We're terminating your employment because your actions have become incompatible with your role as an educator," School Board Chair Hendricks said. "Teachers are held to a higher standard. They're expected to be role models. I am a role model. I'm showing my students that you stand up to bullies. I'm teaching them that you don't let powerful people walk all over you just because they have money and influence. You're showing them how to be disruptive and confrontational," Superintendent Mason shot back. "You're teaching them that it's acceptable to disobey authority." Sarah stared at the 4 people who were about to destroy her career. What authority? The authority of corrupt developers. The authority of officials who take bribes. The authority of people who forge documents and commit arson. "That's enough," the attorney said. "Ms. Chen, you have 2 options. You can resign voluntarily, effective immediately, with a neutral letter of recommendation. Or you can force us to terminate you for cause, which will make it extremely difficult for you to find employment elsewhere." Sarah looked around the room at Principal Williams, who wouldn't meet her eyes, at Superintendent Mason, whose comfortable salary depended on keeping wealthy donors happy, at School Board Chair Hendricks, whose husband worked for a construction company that did business with developers. The corruption went deeper than she'd imagined. Cross-development might be gone, but the system that had protected them was still intact. And now that system was coming for her. "I need to make a phone call," Sarah said. "You have 5 minutes," the attorney replied. Sarah stepped into the hallway and dialed Elena's number. "They're giving me the choice between resigning or being fired for cause." "Don't resign. If you resign, you'll never be able to prove retaliation. If I don't resign, they'll destroy any chance I have of teaching again." "Sarah, listen to me. There are reporters waiting outside the school right now. Channel 7, The Washington Post, CNN. If you walk out of that office as a fired teacher, you become a national story about retaliation against whistleblowers. If you resign quietly, you disappear. Sarah could see the reporters through the school's front windows, their cameras ready, their questions prepared. One phone call from Alina had turned a quiet termination meeting into a media event. What if I don't want to be a national story? What if I just want to teach? Then you need to fight for every other teacher who might face the same choice someday. You need to show them that educators don't back down from bullies. Sarah thought about her students, the kids who would arrive at school in 2 hours expecting to find her in her classroom, kids who looked up to her, who trusted her, who counted on her to be there every day. She thought about Mrs. Rodriguez, the custodian who told her that watching her fight had inspired her to report sexual harassment by her supervisor. She thought about Mr. Patterson, the veteran teacher who'd said her courage had given him the strength to speak up about administrative corruption he'd witnessed. She thought about all the teachers across the country who faced impossible choices every day between speaking truth and keeping their jobs. Between protecting their students and protecting their careers, Sarah walked back into the office. "I'm not resigning," she said. "If you want to fire me for defending my constitutional rights, for refusing to be intimidated by criminals, for standing up to corruption, then you'll have to do it publicly, and you'll have to explain to the media why Millbrook County thinks teachers should shut up and let developers destroy their lives." They'd expected her to take the easy way out, to slink away quietly and disappear. Ms. Chen, the attorney, said slowly, "I strongly advise you to reconsider. If we terminate you for cause, it will follow you for the rest of your career. Let it follow me. Let every school district in America know that Sarah Chen was fired. For refusing to be a victim, let them know that some teachers care more about doing what's right than doing what's safe." Principal Williams finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah, please, don't make us do this. You don't have to do this. You're choosing to do this. And that choice says everything about who you are and what you value." Sarah stood up and walked toward the door. "I'll be in my classroom, preparing for my students. When you're ready to fire me, you know where to find me." The walls were covered with student artwork, motivational posters, and photos from field trips and class celebrations. The reading corner still held the beanbag chairs she'd